So in my market, I'm going to start with Hammond, Indiana, and then this is, let me clear this out. So I'm going to start with Hammond, Indiana. That's one of the cities. I mean, again, you can do this based on county, city. I believe you can do this based on zip code. Or yeah, you can do this based on zip code also. But I'm just doing based on the city that I buy a lot of properties in. So I'm going to do Hammond, Indiana. So once you do that, it's going to give you basically a list of all the houses in Hammond, Indiana, like 25,926. So Phil, this is where if you compared, for example, the city without applying any filters, like these numbers should exactly be the same, but they would be like off by very small percentage, in either direction. But because I haven't applied any filters, so it's just showing me all the houses in Hammond, Indiana, that there are. So now you can go into the filter side of it. Do you want to look at owner? And I'm just going based on kind of what I am doing in my business. You can, depending on the market that you're in, you can expand the search, or you can make it a little bit tighter. That's totally up to you. And then, what your marketing budget is, how many records you get. So for me, owner occupied, I'm going to do, they should not be owner occupied. So I'm going after an absentee owners list. And then occupancy status, it doesn't matter to me whether they're occupied or vacant. So I'm just going to leave it as any. And then for property characteristics, I only want to buy residential. So once you do residential, and then property type, within residential, single family, we do not want to buy any condo or townhomes in our market. So I'm just going to do multifamily 2 to 4. I'm also going to select multifamily 5+, even though there aren't many, but I'm just going to select that. And then you can do based on bedrooms, bathrooms. I personally do not use bedrooms and bathroom because it's not always 100% accurate, whether you're using PropStream, whether you're using list source, because even the counties don't always have the most accurate data. So for example, if counties have data and somebody finished their basement and they added an additional bedroom or bathroom, or, did an addition to their house, so that, by the time that's updated at the county level, and then it's updated at the PropStream or, the data aggregators level. I personally do not use it, but again, it depends on your neighborhood. If you get like hundreds of thousands of houses that you don't want to go after, then you can always add that and just add that another filter option when you're looking for your property. So again, I don't use any building size, lot size. That's not a criteria that's important for us. Year built, most of the houses in our neighborhood built around 1940s, 1950s, but I leave it blank because I don't think that information is always available. But you can go in, and again, regardless of which data source you're using, you can find these search options in pretty much all of them. So it's up to you if you want to filter it based on year build, other home features that you have, and then the unit rates number. So I don't do that. We don't do anything with MLS also. So for us, we just buy anything. We don't filter it down based on the MLS, but you could do that if this is more relevant for if you were kind of going after, properties that have like expired listing recently, or, if you have some specific marketing that you want to do to those, if you want to go after the failed listing, then you could always do that. But for us, we're using a more broader search criteria than like narrowing it down. So for us, again, if I had like 100,000 properties that came up in my list, then I would want to filter it down, make it narrower, but that's not what I want to do right now. Again, we don't use pre-foreclosure and bank loan, but you could use that. I haven't seen, based on my experience in talking to other investors, I haven't seen like, lots of pre-foreclosure activity happening. So again, I would, if, the broader search meets your criteria, I would just kind of leave it, not check anything here. The ownership type is definitely an important one. So the way we're going to think of this is if you are buying, so essentially what you're looking to do is you're looking to buy properties from somebody that's had motivation to sell a property at a price where it would make sense for you to buy it as an investor. So, years of ownership is very, very important. You want to make sure that they've, or at least in my experience, I think I bought like maybe one property that I bought from someone who had just got the property within last year, but it wasn't from the marketing that we were doing. They reached out to us through our Google ads. So, but if you're sending any outbound marketing, it's pretty standard where years of ownership, you want to, have a minimum of 5 years of ownership, like that this owner has owned the property for at least 5 years before, they would have, before you would market to them. Somebody who's, bought a house, let's say in last 6 months, right? You don't really want to market to them because they won't have any motivation. Generally, in 5 years, people have had some sort of life event, either, they've had kids or, they've had kids, they want a bigger house now. So they might have a motivation to sell, or maybe they got divorced or they had kids that, moved out. Now they want to downsize their house. So that's something you definitely want to kind of 5 years or more years of ownership. And you want to make sure you're including unknown last sale date. So a lot of this data that data aggregators are getting, like PropStream, ListSource, it comes in, like a lot of the data that comes from county comes with like a lot of blank information. For example, there will not be any last sale date available. So you want to make sure you're including it. You are, so hopefully you will not have any properties that were recently sold and then the county did not input any information. Generally, these are properties that sold like maybe 30, 40 years ago where the county wasn't keeping up their, didn't have the best data that they were, recording in their system. And that's where they might not have put in the sale date. So that it's, I always do that. We used to like track it very, very specifically based on, okay, do we know their last sale date? Do we not? But we decided it just makes sense to include unknown last sale date. And talking to other investors, they've noticed the same thing, that there's usually some really good properties included in that list of last sold date. And then you could include some other motivation points also, like lien, bankruptcy, divorce status in that in your list also. Let's say if you have a very big list of 100,000, and that's not, you don't want that size of a list that you want to market to. So I have 2,986. Let's say, if I do has active liens, that number goes down to 4. Now that's a very, very small list for me. So I'm going to say, you know what, I'm not going to include this. It doesn't matter to me whether they have a lien or not. So I'm going to leave it blank. And there's some other, bankruptcy recording. You can, search by that also if you want to get very, very specific on your marketing. Again, it just starts, start with a broader list. The two most important things I would say is you want to make sure that they've owned their property for at least 5 years, plus unknown last sale date. And the next one I would say is very, very important is that they should have equity in their house. Unless, in some situations where you're doing, short sale, that's a different situation. But if you're not doing short sale, a typical investor, as a typical investor, you would want to make sure that they've had at least, I would say like 30 to 40% equity in their house. So how you want to do that is estimated percentage. You want to do 30. And once you put in 30%, you notice that this thing pops up, include unknown equity. So once I do that, so if you look at this, I have 2,885 properties right here. Once I check include unknown equity, this number goes to 2,946, meaning that there are some properties that do not have known equity. It's such a small list that I would want to make sure that I include that in my marketing and just start from there. So two most important things I would say is you want to start out with, you could do 30% again. Let's say if, I did not want to send direct mail to, almost 3,000 people, or I did not want to cold call these 3,000 people. You can always change to 40%. And then, see if that changes the number significantly for you guys. So then it's all about two most important things in your filter is how long have they owned the property for? I would say 5%. That you want to see at least they've owned the property for 5%. It's pretty standard. Then you want to include the unknown last sale date, and then they should have equity in the house. Because the reason is, let's say if you only use one of them, let's say if you only use people that have owned their properties for 5 years. So let's say if you have somebody that's owned their property for 10 years, so that's one filter. But if you do not use the equity filter, they might have owned their property for 10, 15, 20 years. But what if they just refinance and they have zero equity in their house? So there's no point marketing to someone who's owned their house for 10, 15, 20 years when they do not have any equity in their house. So you want to make sure they've owned the property for long enough where they have gone through some sort of life event, they have some motivation to sell their property. And then on top of that, that they have at least 30 to 40% equity in their house.